title. This paper is actually part 2, because yesterday we had Daniel Things who talked a little bit about it, and I'm going to give it a post-colonial perspective. This paper examines Massimiliano Bruno's first feature film, Nessuno mi può giudicare, 2011, a successful comedy which last year received 2 notable prizes, the Nastro d'Argento for Best Comedy and the David Di Donatello for Best Female Protagonist for Paola Cortellesi. The film recounts the story of Alice, played by Cortellesi, an upper-middle-class woman from the district of Barioli who faces bankruptcy and even prison after the death of her financially irresponsible and unfaithful husband. Terrified at the thought of going to jail because of debt and abandoning her 9-year-old son Filippo to foster care, Alice attempts to quickly raise a large amount of money in every possible way. She sends her big Londons to a poorer district of Rome, Barticciolo, and after many unsuccessful job searches, she starts to work as an escort. As a comedy, Nessuno mi può giudicare provides many light moments and, of course, a happy ending. In the film's finale, or almost happy ending, in the film's finale, Alice, who has paid off her debts and abandoned her work as an escort, starts a promising new life with another less problematic job and with a new, hopefully more responsible man, Giulio, who is played by Ramon. In this paper, I employed Bruno's movie as a useful tool for discussing post-feminism in contemporary Italian cinema and its particular relation to post-colonialism. In particular, I compared the social message and the ironic and parodic mode of Bruno's comedy to Pietro Germi's social critique in films like Divorzio all'Italiana and Sedotta Abbandonata. In order to shed light on the director's portrayal of Alice's progressive self-awareness and changing identity, I also explored the movie's various cinematic intertextual presences as well as its representation of the immigrant in Italy. The film's title, Nessuno mi può giudicare, and its first sequence testify to Bruno's desire to encourage his own audience from the start to recognize his work's socio-political implications and to experience at the same time the light-heartedness of Musicarelli. Musicarelli are a film subgenre popular mainly in the 1960s, employed to provide commercial support for famous singers and their new lyrics. More precisely, the movie's title recalls the mildly subversive force of Caterina Caselli's homonymous song from 1966 and the carefree atmosphere of its Musicarello by Ettore Maria Pizzarotti in the same year. In the song Nessuno mi può giudicare, the singer was affirming her own self-sufficiency, a condition which became a major concern among Italian women in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Many, some of whom initially regarded Caselli as a sort of spokeswoman for them. Indeed, Bruno's film starts in a carefree fashion with one of Alice's 3 immigrant housekeepers, Florante, swinging on a hammock and singing Senti il sentimento, a song written by Bruno and now sold separately, an opening which might be regarded as a kind of product placement in the traditional Musicarelli. And now I would like you to see the idol swinging Florante is eventually caught and rebuked by Alice with an ungraceful and yet humorous remark.
Senti sentimento.
Ma perché volete che faccia di titolare? Senta, io le avevo chiesto, la cover band di Alo Stamazzocchi, perché ascoltavamo le tue canzoni quando iniziamo a fidanzare? Mo che io invece hanno detto che se trovavo 5 copie che ci si iniziano a copilare. No, state in secondo che c'è un'extra comunitaria che mi deve sapere mettere a Florante, ma io mica devo portare il sole in giardino. Florante, ma che cazzo fa?
In the opening scene, we meet the female protagonist Alice Bottini, who is portrayed as an unconscious product of upper-middle-class politics, quite secure of herself and a little arrogant and racially prejudiced. The director Bruno, however, who in an interview had suggested a desire to avoid casting his comedy's main character in any damaging negative light, soon undermines this apparently confident Alice. Already at the close of the first sequence, the male protagonist Giulio critically remarks to Alice, sai qual è il tuo problema? Il vestito. And this is the scene I think we saw it yesterday too. She actually wearing the kind of dress. A comment which hints at her erroneous obsession with appearances and which for a moment leads her to look at herself with insecurity. Alice's confidence is then further destroyed in the following scenes, where she, like the homonymous character in Lewis Carroll's novel Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, faces several unexpected and incredible events, including the death of her husband and impending bankruptcy. These sudden reversals are filtered in a parodic and ironic manner and are meant to underline the misleading status of her marital and financial life, as she discovers that her husband was cheating on her and had not informed her of their precarious financial situation. Bruno's light cinematic format might tempt one to think that he is oversimplifying the theme of prostitution, just as Pietro De Germi was in the past thought by some critics to have done, for example, with the topic of marriage separation in Divorce Italian Style. In that film, Germi ironically and light-heartedly portrayed the murder of a Sicilian woman by her husband in his attempt to fulfill the dream of subsequently marrying his beautiful young cousin. There was no divorce by then. Yet laughter, as Millicent Marcus has pointed out, regarding Germi's use of it in movies like Divorce Italian Style and Seduced Amendment, may in Nessuno mi può giudicare be regarded not simply as an end in itself, but rather as a tool useful for criticizing a system which potentially may lead to such extremes as killing a wife or prostituting oneself. Tragicomedy is, after all, characteristic of the best comedy Italian style, as notable comedian Mario Monicelli has affirmed. A significant similarity in cinematic style between Germi and Bruno is their ironic and personal use of voiceover in their respective films, Divorce Italian Style and Nessuno mi può giudicare. In Divorce Italian Style, the sound commentary reproduces the thought of main character Pepe, who satirically narrates his own social and private condition, allowing spectators to experience closely the insanity of his own mind in an amusing way. Likewise, in Nessuno mi può giudicare, the ironic and humorous commentary of the voiceover belongs to someone partly involved in the story, spoken by actor Valerio Mastandrea, a client/friend of the escort Eva, who in the film finale amusingly refers to her as una cara amica, troppo cara. Both directors have opted for a subversive, for a subjective voiceover, ensuring that the film story is presented through the perspective of an insider. And here I would like to add that, and I have not really come up with something about it, but the fact that Bruno, in the DVD that came out, has added a version of the film with his own commentary, together with the scriptwriter for Bruno. So it seems as if he's wanting to make sure that he puts his authority there and has people understand the film in particular way. The use of a storyteller involved in the film account complicates its narrative and also challenges the audience's reliance on a fixed perspective. And here I refer to my recent article that I've written where I put out the same thing on Marta Curati's Logista Distanza. As such, Bruno's use of voiceover in Nessuno mi può giudicare accompanies the progressive evolution of the female protagonist in her growing openness to other people's points of view, which I investigate in the following section. In this final section, I discuss Bruno's representation of Alice's encounter with the other as a significant topic contributing to the development of her self-awareness and social growth. With the other, I will maintain both the prostitute, Eva, who at first functions as a stereotypical binary opposition to the good mother, Alice, and also the film's immigrants, who initially stand in contrast to the wealthy Italian woman, Alice. As suggested yesterday by Hipkins, Eva represents the category of a post-feminist woman who has by choice decided to sell her own body for money. Thus, the prostitute Eva provides Alice not only a contrasting feminine model against which the latter defines herself, but she also offers Alice entrepreneurial help, solidarity and friendship, which towards the film finale erases the former tension between the two, illustrating that Bruno's main female character has expanded her social boundaries. A similar progressive relation takes place between Alice and immigrants. Starting with the movie's first sequence, foreigners play a defining role for the film's main character. As mentioned earlier, Nessuno Mi Può Giudicare starts with the foreigner Florante, happily swinging on a hammock and singing a song celebrating sentimento or feeling, which is what wealthy Alice is lacking. By conferring on Florante the first movie shot, the director symbolically prioritizes the help over the master, and through an ironic reversal of roles, partly foreshadows the future for Alice, who will soon be dethroned from her own hammock, so to speak. In addition, in Slavoj Žižek terms, Alice appears to be envious of Florante's cheerfulness. Her abrupt reaction to the immigrant typifies the average Italian's fear of being deprived of the enjoyment of her own wealth and culture. In this case, the hammock, an Italian song. In the following scenes, Alice is portrayed reprimanding and giving orders to Florante and to her other two immigrant housekeepers, Jimena and Aziz. Alice's interactions with these foreigners characterize the female protagonist of Bruno's film as a conservative individual embracing stereotypical Italian reflections on immigrants. Foreigners are lazy, unreliable, and often difficult to communicate with. Bruno portrays bias and racism against immigrants as a phenomenon which is embraced by both higher and lower local classes. After Alice moves to Particciolo, she soon realizes that the porter Lionello is quite politically incorrect. Not only does he not offer her any help with her suitcases, but he starts his conversation with Alice with three quite strong racist sentences. Referring to immigrants, he says, questi vengono in Italia e se pensano di fare I padroni. Ma che si credono che sono al paese loro e possono fare quello che gli pare? Io li caccerei a calci nel culo. At this point, the voiceover ironically says that he would win the election to this last one. The best of Lionello's racist performance is given when he cites from Nanni Moretti's Ecce Bianchi e neri siamo tutti uguali, ma che siamo in un film di Nanni Moretti, te lo meriti Nanni Moretti. Whereas in Ecce the sentence Bianchi e neri siamo tutti uguali was put in the mouth of a person on the left, here it is ironically uttered by a qualunquista on the right. Paradoxically, in the film finale, the conservative and racist Lionello ends up having an African girlfriend and a gay son. As such, the porter's story is a supportive subplot to the main narration of Alice's evolving attitude towards the other. Various factors contribute to making Alice's treatment of foreigners change progressively from condescending to respectful, including Adiz's solidarity and his help in finding a last-minute accommodation after Alice's eviction, and her opportunity to share a new neighborhood with several immigrants, which allows her to come to know them better. Do I highlight Alice's progress, acceptance of the other? Bruno juxtaposes two scenes where she reacts to similar events in a diametric opposite way. In the first sequence of the film, after Aziz had dropped sunglasses when bumped by one of Alice's illustrious guests, she asked him in a strong tone to apologize. Chiedi subito scusa, signore. Later, in the second half of the movie, when faced with an identical incident at a party where she is performing as an escort, Alice demands that the person who has bumped the waiter should apologize. Chiedi subito scusa al signore. In this case, the status of signore has been reserved and conferred on the waiter. When the person refuses to excuse himself, Alice does it for him. Senti, sono mortificata, guarda, ti chiedo scusa io da parte sua. Tu devi essere orgoglioso di essere africano, capito? Surprisingly and ironically, the waiter then declares to be actually an Italian from Catanzaro. Ma veramente io sono di Catanzaro, and Alice is faced once more with the concept that appearances are often deceitful. Another deceiving element which the director emphasizes is that although the internet porn manager Giulio shows himself to be concerned for immigrants and to treat them rather generously, for instance, he lets Marcello use their service for free. He needs excuses, of course, but he knows that there are fake excuses. He proves to be quite conservative when it comes to dealing with a female other in a sentimental relationship. Giulio suggests more than once that his friend Biagio should refuse to take back his cheating ex-girlfriend. And later, once Giulio learns Alice is an escort, he breaks up with her. It is only in the film finale that he appears to understand and accept Alice's temporary professional choice, undergoing a similar evolution as Alice. Both characters abandon their static, stereotyped conception of the other and grow in their renewed encounter with them. In the last analysis, Bruno's Nessuno mi può giudicare shows that the transnational dimension in Italy has accelerated the public dialogue for emancipation, integration, and self-determination. Like the majority of Italian film directors who have recently treated immigration, Bruno opts for representing foreigners in a positive key, as catalysts, and he accompanies his sympathetic portrayal of an escort with a similarly positive attitude toward foreigners. In order to render his subject more familiar and appealing to his audience, Bruno has relied on a wide variety of intertextual presences, more or less popular, in addition to some classical Italian films, which I actually discussed earlier, but I didn't really mention here because of the lack of time. Anyway, popular culture is very important, and instances from popular culture are taken from Italian television. There's a reference to Stranamore and Boris, several characters that are playing Boris in the movie. From American movies, from Pretty Woman, when Alice changes dresses for her escort pictures, we see connections, and it's not only me saying this, it's actually the film director Bruno, who in his commentary is pointing that out. From the Western of Sergio Leone, when Leonello goes into Giulio's shop to ask him for help. And finally, from Cine Panettoni. In fact, in his commentary, Bruno indicates that the scene of Alice finding a phallus under a pillow, we saw a picture of it yesterday, comes from one of the Vacanze di Natale movies. And here I found very illuminating what Alan O'Leary said yesterday about the use of the cannibales for the Cine Panettoni, and I think it works very well for this movie too. By using intertext from a wide spectrum of sources, Bruno satisfies the need both to entertain and to provide a social critique, departing from the known of a large audience. And now, going back to the foreigners topic, a similar procedure has been followed by the director for the subject of foreigners. Like other Italian film directors such as Gianni Amelio, Bruno tries to familiarize Italian spectators with immigrants by adopting an Italian perspective and translating in Italian terms the figure of the immigrant. In other words, by highlighting what Italians share with foreigners, he makes it possible for them to accept immigrants as sharing a common experience. And for instance, Bruno has Alice moved to Corticciolo, which historically was the area of Rome where southern Italian immigrants had relocated and is now inhabited by extracomunitari and some lower class locals. Although Bruno's Nessuno mi può giudicare promotes relatively liberal views towards immigrants and women, it nevertheless appears partly to embrace a patriarchal construction of emancipated femininity, where liberated women behave essentially like men or at the pleasure of men. This phenomenon is not new. It has been recognized and is operating in the past by contemporary Italian scholars like Muraro, Zamboni, and Cabarero. In Bruno's Nessuno mi può giudicare, Alice manages to manages to eliminate her debts and becomes successful because she obliterates her real self and resorts to working as an escort. The film's finale, however, seems to point to the possibility of a more positive development. After brutally reconnecting with her own body and redefining and expanding her own boundaries with the surrounding reality, the film's protagonist exemplifies what Jonathan Boyne calls fluid growth. Alice is a woman who confines herself no longer to negative static forms, but now accepts the positive value of difference and change.